Let's figure out how to do this. Hello everyone, welcome back to Maverick Mods. Working on the Firebird again this week. Pretty much got the body panel alignment done. Got a few tweaks here or there yet to go, but I do have a little bit of fab work left. Mainly the fuel system. Essentially today, the fuel tank. So going to be working on modifying the fuel tank to make the LS swap doable. So grab your popcorn, let's dig in. One of the admittedly many issues of doing an LS swap on the Firebird or any older vehicle is you have to pay a little bit of attention to the fuel system. Mainly fuel pressure. Back in the old days, we had mechanical fuel pumps. You just had a pickup in the tank. It would suction fuel to the mechanical pump, deliver it to the carburetor, and life was good. With fuel injection, the early fuel injections required a relatively low pressure. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but a relatively low pressure. Modern fuel systems, aka the LS era, early LS era, requires a fuel pump that puts out somewhere in the neighborhood of about, I believe it's about 60 psi. I forget the flow rate off the top of my head. Gallons per hour, don't remember that. So on the Firebird here, we've got to think, how do we deal with this? And there's a couple of options. Of course, we have a fuel tank that came with Firebird. And the most obvious solution would be, well, just buy a fuel tank that's EFI ready. And so what exactly does that mean? Not only do you get a fuel tank that has a electric fuel pump in it, the issue with these tanks are there's no baffling inside the tank. The tank itself is just one big open tank. So with an electric fuel pump, you really have an issue of unporting the pump itself, which means you're going to see an instantaneous loss of fuel pressure, which means your engine's going to die. So you've got to have something inside the tank, aka a baffle of some kind, that will trap fuel so that regardless of the maneuvering you're doing with the car, be it accelerating, decelerating, turning a corner, anything less than a full tank of fuel, as it sloshes, you won't uncover or unport the fuel pump itself. So there are EFI ready tanks available. Holley makes one, Phytech makes one, a couple of other companies make them. And the average price for one of those tanks is about between $700 and $800. And I'm scratching my head thinking, really? Seriously? Okay, a replacement fuel pump assembly this thing right here through an online, I'll say it, through Rock Auto is less than $100. And that is the pump, the basket, literally everything you need. You drop this in the tank, spin your retaining ring on, plug it in, and it works. It's $100. And it's for the LS motor. The only difference inside the fuel tank itself on these EFI ready tanks is they put a little box that's tack welded somewhere where the pump is supposed to be to trap fuel. That's it. That's all there is. And really, $800 for that? So I'm scratching my head thinking, well, like everything else on this car, can I do it as good without spending $800? Let's give it a try. So here's the plan. Before I actually start working on today's project, I'm going to interrupt myself one more time, hopefully one more time. I talked about fuel systems, and it kind of, to me, even when I reviewed it, sounded like I was more talking about the fuel tank without addressing the fuel pumps. Very briefly, there's two kinds of pumps I can use. One would be an external pump, the other is an internal pump. External pumps are really pricey. They're somewhere toward $500 and up just for the pump. And the reason is because the internal pumps are actually submerged in fuel and the fuel cools them. An external pump has to allow for, boy, that pump really gets hot when it runs, and it has to allow to be able to cool that external pump. Obviously, the other reason why I'm going to do what I'm doing today is if you ever need to replace a fuel pump, you don't have to go buy some high price exotic pump. You can just dial up Rock Auto and order a new fuel pump complete assembly, pull the old one out, drop the new one in. That's my thought process on this. It kind of hits the easy button in a way. Okay, on to the project. Here's the fuel tank that came with the Firebird. I've already cleaned it up. I've already epoxy primed it. It's no rust holes, no interior rust. The tank's in good shape. Of course, it's obviously not EFI ready. It's just the old tank, which means that inside of here, it's just wide open. So how come I can't just drop the Z28 fuel pump into this tank? Two problems. Problem number one is it physically doesn't fit. Problem number two is this tank depth is essentially as close as you can measure it, about 7 inches. Maybe a hair under that if you factor in the baffles. My fuel pump assembly here, let's see if I can do this and you can see it. It's spring-loaded here so that it always stays at the bottom of the tank. Is basically about just over 9 inches. So it's too tall. And there's no really valid way to adapt this. And the reason is because my fuel pump assembly here, of course the fuel pump is down in here, and this basically is my baffle. So fuel inlet comes in at the bottom here, and fuel is trapped inside of the container here, the plastic container. That becomes the baffle, so that there's no additional baffles needed inside the tank itself. So there's an advantage to using this. The other advantage to using this is if the fuel pump ever fails, you replace the entire unit. And so it's actually really simple and really easy to do that. So I have an advantage of trying to adapt this into my tank itself. So let's figure out how to do this. I got my template made up. That's basically, I'm thinking just about what it's going to look like. Now I know that this is going to interfere with the trunk floor, so I'm going to make a cutout that will match this in the trunk floor of the Firebird, which is going to solve another problem, which is easier access if you ever have to access or replace the fuel pump again. In the trunk floor, there'll be a removable cover, and all of this will be accessible. Let me transfer this over to a piece of metal and get it bent up, and let's see how close I was. I can't quite test the fuel pump yet with this template because I need to cut out the interior portion of the old flange, but height-wise, I'm actually a little bit tall, which is good because that gives me a little bit of wiggle room to fine adjust the edges here. Let me cut some metal and we'll see what it looks like. I transferred my pattern over to a piece of sheet metal, cut it out, tried to figure out how to fold. I even made myself a few little tabs there so I could kind of spot weld it together, at least to hold its shape. And then I had to, you know, kind of tailor it a little bit to fit the opening itself. So spent a little bit of time getting it just about where it needs to be. And now I need to cut my opening out of the tank itself, do a little bit more test fitting, and then work on the locking ring. I got to do that before I even think about welding this to the tank itself. So with my, I don't know, what would you call this thing? Tower, castle, whatever this thing is, the extension. With that set, before I can think about welding this in, I had to work on my locking ring. And what I came up with, originally I wanted to use the actual twist locking ring from the original Firebird. So watch this short clip about me trying to remove that from the original Z28 fuel tank. I need to take the locking ring, well, the locking ring itself, the mount for the locking ring, I need to take that from the original Z28 fuel tank. It's not really that hard. The fuel tank is plastic, the locking ring is metal. All I've got to do is actually physically cut the ring out of the tank. So here we go. It's actually kind of interesting. I've never actually taken apart, disassembled one of these plastic fuel tanks before, but it's fairly thick. I mean, it looks like the black part is 1/8 inch. There's an inner layer here that's a different type of plastic. Looks like they're bonded together, molded together, whatever it is. I think these tanks, I've never had a complaint with them. I think they're probably made pretty well. Well, that didn't work for a number of reasons. So basically I had kind of go old school. I cut myself a ring and I used part of the actual locking ring from the Z28 and created a system where I can just bolt down the fuel pump itself. Now I need to mount that. I need to center it and mount this locking ring to my extension before I can think about permanently mounting the extension. So I've got my ring. Basically, here's my upper locking collar, I guess you could call it, gasket, O-ring, whatever you want to call it. And I went ahead and drilled and tapped 5 holes that I could put in some screws that would act as studs. So this is actually going to sit this way, not that way. Now I need to align it and basically relieve the areas in my extension where the heads of the screws are, or actually not even that far. I just need to drill holes and I'll screw all the way through. It'll make sense here in a little bit. All right, so I drilled out my holes and my top. Let's put my screws in. I've got my ring on my extension here. And so this will just fit right onto there, like so. Trap the fuel pump inside of it. Spent a little time with the welder. Got the inside edge here sealed. Went ahead and got the outside edge welded up and sealed, so I guaranteed there's no way that fuel can leak out through the flange here. Went ahead and got my screws in, and I JB welded the screws in so that it completely is the shoulder and the first part of the threads are completely covered in JB weld, so that will seal the screw heads, the screws themselves. Now let's go ahead and get it in place, find exactly where it needs to be. I need to mark the edges. At this point, like I say a lot on this project, we're reaching a point where there's no going back now, because once I cut into this tank, it's no longer a usable original Firebird tank. So let's do some cutting. we're going to try and run a couple of straps across this just to get a little bit of pressure down. I'm going to tack it in a few spots. We got some ratchet straps just to, not really to compress it, but just to put a little bit of downward pressure on it. Hopefully, and it looks like it tightened the perimeter up really well. I'm going to come in, I'm just going to hit some tacks, about 1 every inch or so around the perimeter. We can take the ratchet straps off from there. Got it tacked in from here. I'll just perimeter weld it. Got to get the corners up here as well. And we're going to spend a lot of time with a light, looking for any light shining through. That'll tell me if I've got any pinholes in there. Once this is done, we'll test fit the fuel pump, and we'll have to pressure test the tank as well. But it's a good start so far. Now we get to try and fit this monstrosity that I just created. I have to make an actual hole in the trunk floor. So let's see if we can get it lined up. Move it to your left a little bit. About like there. Yeah, about right there to start it with. This is pretty much right where it needs to be. Okay, let's drop it down. I'll measure it and get the foot. Okay, we could reach the back of the tank to get the basic measurement. Couldn't get to the forward, but I measured the tank itself. I need to go 9 inches back from that mark. Mark there. And then basically just bring this one straight across. Okay. All right. Let me draw this out, and let's cut a hole in the brand new trunk floor. I normally don't like grinding above me like this, just because it's a pain in the butt, it's uncomfortable, sparks go everywhere. I'm going to try it. If it doesn't work, I'm going to drill holes in each corner and then lower the car back down, go in from the top and cut it out from there. Let's see if this works. Actually, you know what?
Why don't you just
do it anyway.
your holes.
I'm just going to drill my holes
and work comfortably.
Good idea. All right, Mike had a good idea. Why torture myself? We lowered it down. I transferred my marks, drilled some holes on the corners, and we'll just go ahead and cut it out from here. Okay. All right, now let's raise it up and may see how much fine tuning I need to do in that hole for the fuel tank to fit. There we go. We need to take, I need to pull my line forward probably about another 1.5 inches or so from the feel of it. So let me measure that and recut. Now if I'm really careful, I won't cut through the tank. I'm going to try not to do that. That cleared?
Yeah, it did.
Okay. All right, let's raise it up one more time. Final position for the tank. Make sure that's going to do it. So now I can do a little wiggling. Let's take these down as far as we can. Take the tension off the straps. I can do a little wiggling and make sure that this thing is indeed centered as it's going to be, which is right there. Now I'm going to run my straps up, and that'll bring this up tight so I know that the tank is in its final position. All right, let's take a look and see where the next move is to cover that fuel pump housing. How's that? I've got the tank tightened and in position. Let's do a quick test fit of the fuel pump housing and see how it fits. So we'll just slide in, get my locking ring, which goes this way, compressor down. Now I probably am going to have to clock the fuel pump itself. There we go. I have to get the back one later. All right, I'll still have to do a little fine tuning on the locking ring. I think I got my holes just a little bit too small. I might have to widen them out a little bit. Other than that, that's basically what it's going to look like. Next, I'm going to have to, basically, I'm going to build another box out of sheet metal that looks just like this, except it's going to cover all of this, probably come up to here, come back, and then angle forward. And it will be removable so that if you have to access the fuel pump, it's just a matter of taking that cover off. The fuel tank will come back out next, and I'll have to finish the weld on the perimeter, on the sides here, basically just and clean everything up. And I still have to make my cover. But the fuel tank is essentially modifications, for all intents and purposes, complete. That's going to wrap it up for this week, guys. Got the fuel tank mods done, well, done to the point of needing final welding. And next up, I'm going to be working on building that cover that's going to cover the fuel pump assembly in the trunk itself, on the trunk floor itself. Winding down the preliminary work on the Firebird to the point where probably next week, I'm guessing, I've got some fab work to do. Like I said, on the trunk, I've got a little bit of fab work on the wheel wells and a few little odds and ends here and there. And at that point, the Firebird is going to come apart. I've got some final welding to do, lots of cleanup, some more sandblasting, get rid of some flash rusting. And at that point, it'll be time for paint. So next week, we'll probably wind up the fab work on the Firebird. There's still tons of stuff to do, obviously, but that'll be for future episodes. Certainly appreciate everybody watching. Big thanks to all you guys for tuning in every week. Please like, share, subscribe, thumbs up. You know the drill. We'll see you guys next week. Everybody have a great day.